I've been helping organizations secure their environments, including email, and I'm going to show you what I've been showing them as far as protection mechanisms as well as some exploit techniques. Starting with why is this important? I know that the slide is hard to read. This projector is very poor. So first I'll just start by letting you know that these slides will be available, so information, if you're interested in it, you can get it online afterwards. So Verizon indicated that 40% of breaches have a phishing component. And if you talk to various email security providers, they'll say it's higher than 90%. Other thing is that in 2015 and 2016 Verizon data breach reports, they tracked susceptibility to phishing attacks. And the shocking thing was, despite all the awareness, susceptibility actually got worse. So we're either getting dumber or attacks are just getting better. And because of that trend, the Department of Homeland Security on the bottom reference there, they issued a binding directive last year saying that federal agencies must implement DMARC protection by the end of the year. So I'm going to go through what DMARC is, one of the things here. So what are we talking about phishing email? Well, because it's blurry, it's hard to read, but a phishing email is from some reputable source either offering some reward to take an action or a penalty if you don't take an action, clicking on a link. And if you click on the link, you get some page that wants you to enter a bunch of personal information, credentials. And how do you verify that this is really legitimate or illegitimate? Well, one of the ways you can do that is by analyzing the email header. Now, there's a lot of useful information in the email header, and unfortunately, it's very hard to read here, but you get information about actual senders and various email inspections. So in this situation, there's inspection of an SPF record and a DMARC record. But we can't expect our users to be able to decipher these headers. It's a lot of cryptic information. So the only thing we can rely on with email header analysis is that as security professionals, we should be a little more familiar with it. But even for us, decoding email headers can be cryptic. So I recommend using a parser, and I like MX Toolbox because not only will they break out all the header sections and give you an analysis of them, they'll also check whether or not they're on a blacklist. That says blacklist there, and it'll identify if the various sending gateways are on a blacklist. Now, at the bottom here, I have a link to a resource site. What's really important about email headers, if you're going to try and collect them to analyze them, if someone forwards you a suspicious email, you won't get the header. If someone forwards that message as an attached MSG file, it will include the headers, but they will not be preserved. It's important to note. Just forwarding a email message as an attachment will not preserve the headers. They get modified. The only way to preserve the headers is either use a reporting button that will collect them and preserve them, have the user paste them into the body of a message, which is probably unlikely, have them save the message and then zip it and forward it, or have your email admin collect the original source header from the database for you. All right, so I mentioned DMARC, I mentioned SPF. I want to now describe what those are. SPF in DKIM and DMARC are three email protection mechanisms that are DNS-based. SPF is a listing of all the authorized email systems that are allowed to send as your email domain. And one of the important things with an SPF record is that, this is an example of it, at the very end, you indicate what to do with all other email systems that aren't authorized. And it's very important at the end to have a -all to say, I've listed all my authorized email servers. Everything else is denied. But I've seen a number of systems that use poor SPF records and use a tilde-all or $all, which are basically soft fails or neutrals. And I'll give you an example of one in one of my earlier slides. It was from bankofamerica.com. This bank ends their SPF record in a tilde-all, so that you don't have a good sense of, if an email comes from Bank of America, whether or not it passes SPF inspection. Another one, Comcast.net, also ends their email or their SPF record in a $all, so you don't get a valid sense of whether or not something's passing SPF. Second record, DKIM. DKIM is a crypto signature of the sender. So if you're receiving an email message, you will look up in the DNS record for the DKIM public key so you can validate, did that signature match with the sender? And the last thing is DMARC. DMARC uses SPF and DKIM to validate the legitimacy of the sender. So let me go through how that works. Tough to read again. What DMARC does, if you receive an email, your email system receives an email, it'll check the sender's DNS record. Do they have a DMARC record? If they have a DMARC record, it has policies associated with it. Then they'll check the SPF record and see if it passes SPF. It'll also check, does the from address listed in your email, the displayed from address, align with the from address in the email header, the SMTP from address? If it does, then that's a pass. It'll also check DKIM. Is there a DKIM signature that passes? And does the domain specified in that DKIM signature align with the displayed from domain in the email? And if either DKIM or SPF passes, DMARC passes. Okay. Now, right now I'm talking about authenticity of messages that are sent from someone. How does this protect you when you're getting email? How do you use this to prevent phishing emails from coming in? And the reason why that is important for you is that a lot of organizations have multiple divisions and multiple email domains. And sometimes those divisions are emailing each other. So what you want to make sure is that you're improving the authenticity of email between those divisions so that you're not getting spoofed by malicious third parties or third-party providers that are legitimate, that you're not getting spoofed messages using those domains between divisions. That was part of the premise behind DHISSA creating that binding directive that federal agencies must implement DMARC. The last part about DMARC is that it has a policy where the recipient will then send a report to the reporting system specified in the DMARC record. And you can glean a lot of information about who is sending email as your domain. You can find out that you're being spoofed by malicious third parties, or you can find out about your intentional, legitimately subscribed third-party senders, and you can validate whether or not they're passing the DMARC inspection. So 2 types of reports, aggregate reports and forensic reports. The forensic reports listed here contain a lot more information. But even with just aggregate reports, you can get a good sense of what's being sent out as your domain. And if you don't have DMARC, I recommend you talk to your email administrators, or if you're the email administrator, you set up this record just to be able to collect this reporting information. Now, the logs from DMARC, they can be very numerous, hard to parse through, just like parsing through an email header. So there are a number of DMARC log analyzers. You can pay for them, or you can get free ones. And if you don't have it, the free ones are not that bad. I'll give you an example of a free one. So I used Postmark app, the first one listed here. MX Toolbox, who I was talking about with the email header parser, they have one as well. So free one, kind of washed out, but basically what we're looking at here, in every week it'll send out an email reporting on how many messages were sent as your domain, how many passed DMARC inspection, how many failed, percentage-wise. It'll also list the addresses of the senders and whether or not those senders passed or failed SPF or DKIM inspections. This is really useful. What you want to make sure is that you get these reports and you hold your third-party senders accountable for making sure contractually they pass DMARC inspection, because you want them to, if you're paying them to send your email, you want to make sure that it's authentic, or at least passing inspection that other recipients are going to be doing. Okay. DMARC, though, can't prevent everything. And what doesn't it prevent? Well, homographic spoofing. What homographic spoofing is, a number of visual spoofing type of things, like transposing a lowercase m with a lowercase r and n together. If you can see this right here, that is Microsoft.com, but not an M. That's an R and an N together. That's a version of homographic spoofing. And what can you do about protecting yourself against variations of homographic spoofing? Because they're legitimate domains, so they're not going to be blocked by SPF, DKIM inspections, or DMARC. Well, there's a couple of free tools you can use. One's called DNS Twist. You can get it from GitHub. You can use it to look up variations of your own domain or your third parties. So if you have key vendors who are constantly emailing you, you would benefit by making sure that their domain names aren't being spoofed, so that you're not thinking, oh, I got an invoice from my vendor, but it was really just a spoofed version of their email. There's also a website here called Typo Name West that also can be used to look up variations of domain names. And now, I've covered a number of these things, and I want to show you then how you can use these. All right, again, tough to read, but if you're on the blue team side looking to protect your environment, what you want to do is ensure that your own SPF record has an ending in a -all, so that you're legitimately basically listing what are the authorized senders. And you want to do that for all your divisions. And then if you have a subdomain or division that email is never going out as, you actually want to proactively put an SPF record in that DNS that says no email servers are allowed. You're basically just putting in an empty SPF record that just has a -all at the end. You also want to ensure that your key third-party vendors have legitimate SPF and DMARC records and that they're configured with -all at the end. You want to sign up for a DMARC reporting service. You want to search for visually spoofed domains of your own domain as well as your vendors. And then something else that I haven't covered here is if you have, well, every organization probably has an email group that's everyone. Or you might have department-wide email groups that include everyone in that department. Those distribution lists should not allow email from the outside to be able to send to everyone in those groups. There's very rarely a reason why you would want someone external to your organization to be able to email everyone in that organization. So those groups should be restricted to only allow authenticated internal users. Now, if you're on the attacker side, you could look for an organization's key vendors, and you can check what are their SPF and DMARC settings, and you could try and exploit those to try and inject phishing emails. You could also look for SPF records for if the organization or their vendors don't even have SPF records, or they end in a soft fail. You could also inject fake email headers using a fake mailer. You could use part of the Kali Linux toolkit to inject fake emails. You could use a visually spoofed variation of your own domain or of a vendor's domain. And if the org is susceptible to spoofed email, or if the org doesn't have an SPF or DMARC record at all, then they could be susceptible to spoofed email. And I want to give you an example of a tool I use. I mentioned you could use some of the Kali Linux tools, but I'm kind of lazy. I prefer like nice GUI websites. So I use this fake mailer website. It's freely available. You can all go there. It allows you to enter a variety of parameters. You can spoof who the email is from, which parameters are in the header. The name of this is MK, it's EMKEI. You can look it up, MKEI's fake mailer. I used this just recently, a month or 2 months ago, to send a phishing email to an organization that was allowing everyone in the organization group to be emailed from the outside. Now, they did have a restriction. They said only these individuals are allowed to email that group. And I will bet you in every situation, if you have a group site like that, it's going to allow the head of HR or the head of IT or the CEO, and you just spoof that address, one of those 3 addresses, or any of it, possibly is going to allow all 3 of those. I just used the head of HR's email address and was able to send a phishing email to everyone in the organization, unauthenticated. So this is a very useful tool, part of a good set of pen testing, as well as just validating your own email system. You could start just by sending yourself an email from the outside to see whether or not that gets through. And that is kind of the wrap-up, but just so you know, implementing SPF, DKIM, DMARC, this is a timeline from Cisco of what they expected it would take to implement. And I thought it was kind of a useful way of concluding how long it might take to actually ensure you have all this enabled in your own email system. So thank you. I think it's lunchtime, but I will stay if there's any questions. Yes. So you still have to put this into your DNS records. And one of the important things is with Office 365, you're allowing their Office 365 email systems to send email as you. So that's a lot of potential. If you're putting that in your SPF record, you're allowing a wide amount of systems to basically send email as you. And so that's why DKIM is an important supplement to SPF, because it's tied to just your domain. Yeah, you do still have to put the protections in place. I'm not exactly sure how Google implements, for instance, DKIM, whether or not you need to enable it or if they just do it by default. But you have to do it. They can't possibly do it because you have to put the public crypto key into your DNS so recipients can look up, oh, this is your domain, and I can get the public key to validate that that email came from you. You still have to take the actions, including putting an SPF record that says these are the allowed Google domain servers. Usually what you can do is just say, include Google's SPF record as part of your SPF record. Yeah, because again, you're implementing all this through your own domain's DNS. Oh, it's all, got it. Your domain's DNS is where you put these records in. And one of the things I was going to say is also through DMARC, if you don't have DMARC implemented, that's where you can collect all the reporting about who is sending email on your behalf, which may not be people that you expect to be sending it. There's a couple of tools. If you're using Microsoft Office with Outlook, they include not by default, but you can get a report message button that you add into Outlook. So if the user gets a suspicious email, they click on that report message button, and it captures the header information that then the people that are receiving that suspicious email can use to analyze it.
We don't have that, so I'm kind of curious on how
so
the research would be able to identify.
Yeah, maybe they're getting the email and then looking at, okay, who did it come from, subject, and then they're actually going in the back end to get the headers.
That's what I'm thinking.
Because otherwise they're not really, they're not getting anything useful.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Well, thank you. Again, I really appreciate you coming. And